Welcome back to another episode of Drilling Deeper, a Pit and Quarry podcast. This is episode 52. We're going to offer industry updates, and we've got special dealer guests today from Kirby-Smith Machinery and Brandeis Machinery, who will offer insights on what's happening out there in the aggregates industry these days. But first, a word from our show sponsor. Did you know East Rock Solutions is now part of the Kemper Group? And together, they're raising the bar on parts availability, equipment solutions, and turnkey plant design. From the pit to the stockpile, Kemper Group has got your operation covered. To learn more, visit KemperEquipment.com or call 610-273-2066. Thanks to Kemper. Thanks again to Kemper for being our show sponsor. And with that, I'll welcome in co-host Jack Kopanski. Jack, what's going on today?
Kevin, exciting day to be here. Exciting day to talk some aggregate. Crazy to think. I know we're still, I think, 2 episodes away from our actual 2-year mark, but 2 years worth of episodes here, episode 52. Crazy to think it's already been this long that we've been talking rock.
Kind of wild. It's been a lot of fun, and it's kind of reshaped the whole plan of attack for us as editors of Pit and Quarry. You know, a lot of things start digitally, and you know, if you're listening to this show and you've been a loyal listener for almost 2 years now, we greatly appreciate your attention and diving in with us, but we kind of reshaped the show, you know, in its earliest days by bringing guests in. You know, Jack and I have our own insights and perspective, but we've been doing that regularly for some time now, and we're going to hear from a couple of guests on the dealer front today, that being Kirby-Smith Machinery's Gavin Cole and Brandeis Machinery's Robert Krutsinger. But Jack, as you know, I mean, we're living and breathing Pit and Quarry every day here, and we're regularly focused on what's happening on the equipment and technology front, on the business front, and we cover safety from month to month in the pages of Pit and Quarry. And kind of the theme of the show today, I guess I would say, is more going to be driven by what's happening on the business front, but also trends in equipment and technology, as our guests Gavin and Robert are going to dive into that a little bit today. But before we play those interviews, I wanted to at least kind of put a little bit of commentary out there leading into those 2 guest voices that we have, and I guess 3 questions that we're regularly asking as editors, Jack. I mean, you're asking these to the sources that you talk to, and I am as well, but we're asking, how's business out there? You know, and we're already in the 4th quarter, which is kind of hard to believe here across the industry or whatever it is you do. So we're regularly keeping tabs on how business is, and it's kind of an interesting time, and we'll get into that here in a bit, but we're also talking about the trends that are driving equipment and technology development in the aggregates industry, and it's certainly an exciting time for that. And thirdly, what's ahead? What's the future hold? And nobody necessarily has the cards totally in hand to determine what that's going to be. But our guest today, and you know, we'll have some commentary from you and me, Jack, just in terms of what's next. It's something that kind of helps you shape an outlook. Just hearing from different voices across the industry helps me kind of figure out where we are as an industry, being the editorial director of Pit and Quarry. So that's kind of the narrative of our show here today. And you know, on the first question, Jack, I'd say this has been a good year, 2025 for the industry. Good, not great. I think you kind of have an interesting perspective because you've been in the industry. This is your 5th year now, which is kind of hard to believe.
It is.
And you experienced some really, really great consecutive years for the industry, probably in the early years of your tenure here at Pit and Quarry. And I think 2025, like I've said, it's been good. It hasn't been great, hasn't been record-breaking, and that I think is going to be reflected in our guest voices today. But would you agree with that sentiment based on some of the interviews you've done throughout the year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, kind of to your point, having joined the industry about 1.5 years into COVID, it was a very interesting time to join, because at a time where a lot of the industries I was looking at or covering before, sort of doing more local stuff, it was a lot of downturn, it was a lot of struggling, and then I come in here and everyone's kind of like, yeah, you know, it's not ideal situations, but we're doing really well. And I was kind of surprised by that, and I think that was a great indicator of the way the aggregate industry remains very resilient and is able to weather a lot of what is thrown at it. And yeah, for this year in particular, I think we came into this year, you know, looking back to our roundtable at the start of the year, I think there was a lot of talk about backlogs from 24, whether it was weather-related, IIJA funding-related. There was a lot of excitement about this year because of because of that backlog and because of a lot of the projects that were being carried over, but also a lot of uncertainty. You know, we had a new, you know, this was pre-Trump being officially inaugurated for the second time. A lot of uncertainty what was going to happen with tariffs, interest rates, and, you know, there's some stuff we've gotten some clarity on. There's some stuff that's still kind of murky, and so I think all things considered, I'm not surprised that the aggregate industry is doing what it's doing and has done what it's done this year. But yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think this has been a good, not great year, and I certainly think hopes are maybe a little higher for 2026.
Yeah, I was talking to a manufacturer off the record the other day, so I'm not going to name them here, but I've had conversations along this line for several weeks or months at this point, and I think the tariffs at this stage are just making everybody wonder. We don't have great clarity on it at this stage, but they're going to have a big impact, I think, even by the end of the fourth quarter and certainly into 2026 if we don't see any easing take place on that. But again, to reiterate your point, I think it's good, not necessarily great. You know, that manufacturer that I just mentioned, he said this is kind of more normal. And I guess, you know, normal's not bad. I think everybody, whether you're a producer, manufacturer, dealer, or pit and quarry, you know, in normal years is a good thing. We haven't really had a catastrophic or a bad year in quite some time, since really before my time at pit and quarry, and that's going back more than a decade at this stage. So if 2025 you want to describe as normal, I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, but maybe we got spoiled a little bit,
right,
with record-setting years for year after year. So if we're settling for a bad one at this point, or excuse me, settling for a normal one and not a bad one, I think we would take that.
It's funny. I kind of look at it, you know, one of the things we follow closely, you know, we work with a lot of industry economists that kind of look at the construction industry as a whole. And, you know, I was talking to one earlier this year, Dodge Construction Network's Eric Gauss. We had an interview with him a couple months ago, and he kind of raised the point that manufacturing is down like 50% or something, and it's a huge number. But then he follows that up by going, yeah, but that's still well above pre-pandemic. So it is kind of one of those interesting things where when you have a sort of quote-unquote down year, when you look at it in the bigger picture, it's like, oh, we're still kind of killing it. Where it's like, you know, no one wants to be, I guess, down from, again, the highs that we've had the last few years. But, yeah, it is kind of funny where normal has sort of become abnormal, if you will.
Right. So again, the first question that we kind of ask when we're out and about, just to kind of get tabs on where the industry is how is business out there, and secondarily, again, because pit and quarries, the authority on equipment and technology, we're regularly asking our sources, you know, what's trending out there, what's happening, what are producers taking to, and Jack, we were talking offline before we got in the studio here. We talked again about autonomy, predictive maintenance, the use of data, and how the industry's trying to figure out that all out, how to manage all that, and those are kind of the trends that are driving the producers. The producers on the technological front, and I think maybe where things are a little bit more normal on the business front, I think things have maybe evolved or expedited a little bit more on the technology front, because we've seen more news, more headlines, more talk of late of the things that are happening on those avenues on the technology front. You know, autonomy seems like it's made great traction here in 2025, and I'm not saying it's mainstream by any means, but seems like the big producers, like, they're all going at it. They have their pilot programs. They're investing. They're figuring out how it is they're going to bring this into their operations and reshape the way they do things operationally. So AI is very big right now, and I think it's still very early here in 2025. We're scratching the surface there, but again, whereas things may be a little bit more slow but steady on the business front, I think things maybe have taken off a little bit more on the equipment and technology front, which is a good thing, and it's an exciting thing from a coverage standpoint for our readers as well.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting for us to cover, and I know, you know, we've we've gotten out and seen several producers, manufacturers, dealers in some of our travels this summer, and just hearing from them and sort of the excitement they're feeling around some of this emerging technology. It's honestly kind of reassuring to me, where, you know, when I feel like this sentiment has really changed over the last 5 years or so, and maybe even before it, you know, accounting for the time you've been with the magazine, but it feels like there's really been a noticeable paradigm shift from, oh, this is how we've always done it, we're always going to do it this way, you know, new technology, new equipment be damned, to it's going to make our lives a little easier. I'm down to try it out. Like, people are willing to kind of be that guinea pig, if you will, and willing to kind of dip their toe in the water of autonomy, predictive monitoring, doing more stuff with data like you were talking about. So it's a very exciting time for us to cover, and it's a probably even more exciting time to be actually in the aggregate industry, working in the pits and quarries, and sort of having all this at your fingertips.
Yeah. So again, that 3-question approach that we take as editors of Pit and Quarry, it's how are we doing here in 2025? What's trending in equipment and technology? And the third thing I always kind of want to know is what's happening, or what's next to happen. Mm-hmm. Like, what's 2026 going to look like? And I think that third question is kind of where the first and second come together. You take totality, you take stock of the information and kind of where we are with the business side on the equipment and technology front, and it kind of gives you at least some insights on where things may be going. And I think there's still uncertainty there as we look at 2026. We never fully know exactly where the road's going to take us, but I think cautious optimism continues to reign. There's enough there to give people confidence in demand for aggregates, and there's enough there on the equipment and technology front, because what you were kind of alluding to, Jack, with producers being the guinea pigs at a certain point, and now we're seeing things get proven a little bit more, so that's leading to more adoption of some of this cutting-edge technology. So I think that will continue to move forward, but I do think what is transpiring and will transpire on the business front will have an impact or an effect, so to speak, on how much of that technology or how much investment can producers make in 2026 and or the years that follow. Because, again, if it's interest rates, inflation, tariffs, there's a lot of variables there that we just don't have a firm grasp on at this stage here in the early fourth quarter. And we want to see a little bit more pain ease at this stage. And there's a lot more to come that we're going to have to see through in terms of what 2026 is going to look like, Jack.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head, is that it is that cautious optimism. And I think if I had a nickel for every time I've used the phrase cautious optimism in a story since I've been at Pit and Quarry, I probably wouldn't have to work anymore. But I think that really does ring true, because, again, it's an industry that does seem to weather every storm. And no matter what's going on, everybody needs rock. Everybody needs these materials. The demand for that is never going to fully go away. And even with some of the uncertainties and some of these pain points that we're facing, I think the industry as a whole knows they are going to figure it out, in part because they have to, but also because that's just what they do. So I think, to your point, they're definitely, I think everyone would definitely like a little bit more certainty and clarity on certain things, but I think 2026 is going to be a very interesting year as we kind of wind down what 2025 has been full of and see how a lot of those factors evolve or change or get better, get worse. So it's going to be an interesting 12 months coming up here.
I think tariffs are going to be something that are going to have a big impact in the next few weeks, certainly. As I understand it, I guess the Supreme Court's going to be looking at some of the legality of that in November. So that should give us clarity one way or another on how those are proceeding, what the structure or shape of those tariffs look like, how certain countries, whether it's Canada or others, are doing business with us or not, or something in between. So, but I think tariffs, I mean, at their worst, that they have big impacts. I think it kind of starts with the idea of the manufacturers are going to be absorbing higher input costs on their steel, on their raw materials, and we're already started to hear that here in 2025 that's had a real impact. Heard a lot more too, just even over the border. If you're doing business with Canada, we're here in Cleveland, Jack. I mean, they have big impacts and do big business with the U.S. So if we don't see some easement there, that could cause some problems for input costs for manufacturers, and if they have to absorb those on steel and other raw materials, that's going to put pressure on them at the end of the day to raise prices. And I think we'll see that trickle down effect as we've seen the last few years because of inflation in general, with producers having to do the same thing. Fortunately, they've been pretty good at passing along costs, at managing that, at being better cost management on the business side. So So again, that's another thing to watch on the tariff front. And I think from a competitive standpoint, when you think about the manufacturers serving the industry, Jack, it's going to be interesting in terms of a U.S. manufacturer's ability to serve countries abroad, because there's potential retaliatory effects that will come back if our tariffs are structured a certain way or not. And then I think the international players too, I think you mentioned on the show as well, their ability to serve the U.S. market. Like, what's that going to look like in 2026 and beyond? Do they have to kind of redo parts or all of how they're serving the market, where they're making things? And I think that will have a big potential impact on the industry in 2026, and that could lead to supply disruption.
Absolutely.
It could lead to hiring slowdowns. And it could create opportunities for other players, maybe here domestically, to take a bigger piece of the pie, so to speak. So something we're watching closely at, something we're hearing more folks, particularly on the manufacturing and dealer side, stress to us is something that we need to be staying on top of. And again, I think it's something that the producers aren't necessarily at large aware of, Jack, because they've kind of just been doing their thing this year.
Yep.
And they're coming into their buying cycles here. Many of them are for 2026, and it's going to be a real discussion that some of them are going to have with their dealers and or their manufacturers here sooner than later. And all that kind of leads us, Jack, to our two guest interviews today. Again, we talked about the state of the industry here leading up to these interviews, what's happening on the equipment and technology front, and what 2026 looks like. And I think both Gavin Cole and Robert Krutsinger from Brandeis Machinery, Robert's with Brandeis, Gavin's with Kirby-Smith, they both have what you kind of were talking about with the cautious, optimistic outlooks, and that's by and large what we hear from sources. I think if you had a cautiously pessimistic outlook, I don't know if I've ever heard of such a thing, but I think you've got to be optimistic, and we do have good reason to be optimistic, as an industry, as producers, dealers, and manufacturers. So we're going to hear some cautious optimism on some of these different fronts that I've mentioned from both Gavin and Robert. We're going to play Gavin's sound here first, Jack, and then we'll come back and we'll get into Robert next. But let's hear from Gavin Cole, Executive Vice President of Sales at Kirby-Smith Machinery.
Gavin, thanks for joining us here on Drilling Deeper, Pit and Quarry Podcast. 2025, we're already into the fourth quarter. Kind of hard to believe. You're covering some kind of key states as it pertains to aggregates. So what have you seen the first 9 months of the year here in 2025?
It's been a year of continued growth. And Texas continues to grow. Oklahoma is really starting to kick in and grow as well. It's been a good year, I think, for customers and for dealers. Seeing steady growth, people trying to make decisions in sort of a very undecided environment with the politics of things right now. And so trying to stay ahead of tariffs, trying to make prudent decisions and get things in for this year.
How about on the equipment and technology front, Gavin? There's a lot that's coming into the industry all at once at this point. We hear a lot about AI and autonomous technology and automation. So I guess what's kind of rising to the top at this point as producers are looking to make their operations a little bit more modern with technology in 25?
At Con Expo a couple of years ago, I felt like there wasn't nearly as much change. I think this year you're going to see a lot of change coming up in 26. And so, just a continued growth towards sort of aggressive efficiency and scale so that people can grow their businesses and continue to get larger. And so the technology is following right along the demand from the customer. And so, integrating the technologies and figuring out how to fit AI and automation and all of those things into the tools in the business is super important and is being driven by all the manufacturers right now. So, you're seeing lots and lots of steps towards automation.
What's kind of driving the adoption of it at this point? I guess what's missing or are the shortfalls that are ultimately driving the producers to say we want to do our operations and maybe even the back ends of their businesses a little bit differently?
I think the driving force is customers have been asking for efficiency for a long time and they want to be productive, but multiple different technologies are really starting to converge. When you look at new equipment today, you're seeing the GPS components coming together with the LiDAR and all of the different things. So now in addition to that, you got software coming in to, help track your machine. So it's just more and more pieces of the puzzle coming together and starting to work seamlessly.
I'll just ask one more on that front if you're willing to answer. But in terms of their operational setup, the personnel, I mean, is that kind of something that needs to evolve? Do they have to get the right people in place that they're producing companies in order to kind of drive this forward at the end of the day and fully change?
Yeah, from that standpoint, it's really never changed. The companies that are really progressing with any sort of technology have a specific group of people who are focused in on that. Just because it's so much of it is data collection at the end of the day, you've got to have people who can pay attention to that data and refocus it and continue to improve and really stay on top of all of the different things, because you're having to go into websites, you're having to download, you're having to put different tools in different places, and it's super important that you have a group of people who can be in charge of that.
I'm going to press you with one more. Yeah. Just I'm curious on the dealer front. I mean, historically, you've been in the industry for
about 30 years.
30 years, okay. So, you're familiar with kind of how the industry has done things for a long time, and now we're kind of at a big point of change potentially. So as a dealer, I guess, how's the nature of your job changed as you're trying to help producers come into the, the new age?
Our job is to help our customers tool up correctly for where they want to go. And so, just staying with them and trying to be able to support them, provide service and provide the right products and then the expertise to support that. So that part hasn't really changed. However, we're bringing on more and more people who are versed in the technology, trying to use the technology, but mostly it's a relationship business, just trying to stay close with the people who are making the decisions.
Lastly, just want to hear a little bit about what you're thinking, what your customers are feeling as 2026 is kind of nearing at this stage.
2026 is going to be an interesting year for us. There's a lot of motivators to get purchases in and to kind of get this year finished out strong. I see no real reason why that won't continue. There's a lot of big projects, and the industrial space, at least in Texas, there's just so much infrastructure to continue just to keep up with where we are. Oklahoma's growing. I see next year as a really good year, driven by big projects and probably a lot of material needs for those projects. So I think we'll have a good year next year. The stuff that is going to be really hard to predict is how all of the administration decisions are going to impact that. So right now, the biggest key is to stay in communication with your dealer and work as a team and with the manufacturer as well, and make decisions with the information we have and just stay out in front.
Well, thanks again to Gavin Cole. Gavin's based out of the Dallas market. His company, Kirby-Smith, they cover Oklahoma, Texas, and some areas in Kansas City and St. Louis, and we appreciate his perspective. Kirby-Smith's obviously a big dealer. That's a big name out there, and appreciated Gavin weighing in on the state of the industry, what's happening with technology in 2026, and I thought it was interesting what Gavin had to say on the technology front. Mm-hmm. Jack, you and I were talking about it on the front end of the show, but Gavin kind of talked about how some of the more progressive companies, they have a specific group of people that are tasked with leading some of these technology adoptions forward. I think as an industry, we were a little bit slow to move forward on whether it's autonomy or the data collection front, the predictive maintenance front. I know on the show before I've mentioned how whether it's I think ConExpo is a pretty good inflection point on where we are as an industry, but a lot of times, and you've seen this at ConExpos, MineExpos in the past, Jack, but the manufacturers, they're really out in front in terms of the things that they're trying to get the industry, trying to get their customers to adopt, sometimes years out in front of where the industry is. And kind of what Gavin was sharing with me during that interview off-site was that the producers are finally getting there. We're there and we're making some gains, and I think there's going to be more adoption, whether it's smaller, mid-sized, different types of players moving forward. So, again, just the idea that on the technology and equipment front, Jack, we're really at an exciting time for change for our industry.
Yeah, and I think one of the key points that he brought up that stuck out to me is, using the term I believe it was of aggressive efficiencies, where I think that really pinpoints what a lot of this evolving equipment and technology is all about, where, kind of like how safety is always going to be at the forefront of an operations mindset, it sort of feels like 1B or number 2 is going to be efficiency, where, the aggregate industry is a prime example of, time really is money, where if you're shut down for hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's a lot of money going out the window. So if you're able to be efficient in not only the way you're operating, but again, looking at, something, like we've talked about a lot on this show, predictive monitoring and preventative maintenance, where if you can make a 3-hour shutdown because a piece breaks, a half an hour shutdown because it needs to be replaced before it actually goes bad. I mean, that's a huge amount of money you're saving. That's a lot of time you're saving, and you're really also making it safer in that you're not sending someone into an area that's got a bunch of broken parts and stuff that's not working anymore. So that efficiency, I think, is really going to continue to drive a lot of this exciting development and technology. Continue to drive what producers are looking for, what manufacturers are putting into their equipment. So in that regard, I'm very excited for what 2026 and beyond has to hold on the equipment and technology side. Yeah,
I'm glad you mentioned that. I thought Gavin's characterization of that as aggressive efficiency was really interesting. And as he was sharing that with me, I think I might have asked off camera a follow-up to him about the workforce. And I think some of the workforce issues that we've had industry-wide are driving producers to do more aggressive efficiency pursuits on the technology front, where they are having a hard time utilizing people or finding people. But I think at the same time, we're hearing from producers too, and I think Gavin alluded to it in his remarks as well, that we're able to better leverage people or put them in better positions to do higher level work and let the technology kind of take over and drive some of these efficiencies instead. So thanks again to Gavin Cole from Kirby-Smith Machinery. Appreciated you getting together with me at a recent industry event. And at the same event, I was fortunate to pull aside Robert Krutsinger from Brandeis Machinery. Robert's the vice president of sales for Brandeis. They're headquartered in Louisville, Kentucky, and Robert actually has a couple of stints with Brandeis, including his most recent current one that stretches all the way back to 2018 rather. So just like our interview with Gavin, I kind of structured my questions along this similar line. So we're going to hear from Robert Krutsinger about the state of the industry, how things are doing here in 25, what he's seeing on the equipment and technology front, and what he expects come 2026. So let's hear from Robert.
Well, Robert, we're 3/4 of the way through 2025 at this stage, and it's been an interesting year, maybe to say the least, for the aggregates industry. What have you seen as we're sitting here in October at this point?
Very much so. I would say, for 25 so far, it's really kind of been status quo. We've obviously experienced a lot of growth in the aggregate space in the Kentucky, Indiana markets the past 4 or 5 years, and we've seen more of that into 25. Obviously, the market's created some additional challenges, whether it be tariff price increases, machine availabilities with manufacturers cutting back, supply chain there. But overall, it's been another very productive, successful year, and we're looking forward to finishing the fourth quarter strong.
What would you say is driving the decisions on the equipment and technology front this year for aggregate producers, for your customers out there?
Yeah, very strong push in obviously autonomy. You're starting to see a lot of your large producers really start to shift that focus to autonomous haulage specifically. We're a Komatsu dealer, so Komatsu's introduced some solutions recently with their smart quarry solutions. It's really starting to take hold. We've put a couple of those systems in place in a couple operations in the state of Kentucky so far this year, and really giving the producers a lot of great feedback, real-time, really operator performance metrics, production metrics from the haul fleet, loading tools, So we expect that to continue to grow. We think similar to the way that kind of machine control technologies took off in the construction space the past 10 years, we see that as a trend that will probably continue to grow and spread across the marketplace in the aggregate.
We're still early on the autonomy front, but in 3, 4, 5 years, are we going to see this industry look and do things a little bit differently? Wholesalely, or are we kind of just at the tip of the iceberg with the larger?
Without a doubt, yeah. I think we're kind of in a position right now where you've got some third-party solutions. They're trying to find their way in the marketplace, trying to hitch their wagon, so to speak, with some of the major OEMs. So I think you'll see some of that settle out, and probably see some solutions that align with certain OEMs. But for that matter, I think you'll see third-party solutions that are kind of brand agnostic as well, that will be a good solution for customers who operate mixed fleets, as most do. So But yeah, I definitely see that trend continuing to grow as we head into 26 and beyond.
And how about 2026 at this point? I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but what's your feeling? What are producers, what are your customers telling you at this point about their 2026 approach?
We try to keep our finger on, our pulse, finger on the pulse a little bit. We're kind of expecting 26 to be another status quo year. We're kind of, as far as ourselves, we're kind of forecasting and budgeting flat for what 25 has been. We experienced a little bit of a peak in 23 and 24 in our region. 25 has been down roughly 7% so far through the first, 3 quarters, so to speak. But still things are healthy. So we're still overall, pleased with the condition of our markets anyway.
Well, thanks again to Robert Krutsinger of Brandeis Machinery for spending a few minutes with me. Again, a lot we could probably pick out of that short interview, Jack, but Robert did talk about the strong push for autonomy in our industry. He mentioned how they're a Komatsu dealer, and they did a couple projects this year involving that. I would think as they get momentum on that, they're going to continue to see more gains, more interest on the autonomy on the autonomy front. When we say that, we're talking largely about trucks, but as we've discussed too on the show before, Jack, we're seeing that interest shift over to loaders and dozers, and I think one of our guests on the show last week when you were out and about, but Allied Rock is looking at that, and they're not necessarily a large producer, but on the smaller to mid-size side, and it's really great to see that producers are going about looking for those aggressive efficiencies, to use Gavin Cole's words, and again, really thanks to Robert for getting together from Brandeis.
Yeah, and I think the thing that kind of stuck out most to me from this interview was the way he talked about third-party solutions kind of becoming more prevalent, and I think that's another one of those sort of paradigm shifts, like similar to the idea of not sort of saying it's been done this way, we're going to keep doing it this way forever. Whereas I feel like a lot of times, when we receive feature submissions or when we're talking to manufacturers, there's a very big emphasis on, if you want to make sure you're getting something that is going to make your screen box, your crusher, your whatever piece of equipment run effectively and run for, get a full lifespan out of it, use OEM parts, use OEM equipment. So this idea that third party is sort of going to come around, and I love the term you used, that idea of being brand agnostic. That's something we've kind of been hearing a little bit here and there, mostly in, I guess, kind of the AI autonomy front of being able to, work with any kind of truck. Or I know, again, you mentioned Komatsu earlier. Their My Komatsu is a pretty brand agnostic thing. You can kind of see what's going on with all your yellow iron out and about. But yeah, it's just a very interesting idea, and I'm curious to see how that plays out, because I know obviously OEMs are naturally, from a business perspective, always going to push their homemade, their their parts for the machines that they built. But if you can get some third-party solutions that are as effective, or again, like he mentioned, kind of brand agnostic, that's going to be a pretty interesting dynamic in the equipment and technology front moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the big companies. You mentioned Komatsu, Caterpillar, obviously. We all know the big names out there, and it's interesting to me how they're going about pursuing technology, whether it's buying up other companies and bringing these companies in-house, or making partnerships, or the third-party route. So I'm not advocating one way or another. I just find it interesting because we've seen these sorts of deals taking place to make the Caterpillars and the Komatsus of the world a little bit more self-sufficient, bring the people in who are the knowledge experts on these fronts. Well, we're dropping this episode toward late October at this stage, and I feel like at the magazine, Jack, and it kind of sneaks up on us every October, November, this time of year, but things are getting a little bit busy for us. I know you've been doing some travel, and you got more coming up, and I'm kind of in the same boat, but you're going to be getting to South Dakota this week to check out Mesaba, as I understand it, and I'm going to be doing the same thing here as Conwald has an interesting event. They're celebrating their 50th anniversary, so I'm fortunate to get to be a part of that and see their celebration firsthand. And I know we're both going to be getting to check out some producer sites here in the next week or two as well. I'm getting down to Southeast Ohio, and you're getting into the central part of the country here. So
yeah, I'll be heading to Missouri for a few stops at some Capital Aggregates facilities, and then stopping over at Southern Stone. And then from there, Southern Stone actually mentioned that they have a barge station, a barge location in Baton Rouge, so I'll be heading down to check that out as well. So next week's going to be a packed week for me, but it's going to be an exciting one. Going to get out and get to be boots on the ground for a little bit. It'll be exciting.
Yeah, and hopefully between your stops and mine, Jack, we'll have some more sound, some more video to share for Drilling Deeper listeners and viewers in episodes to come, and looking forward to seeing what you bring back from Missouri and Louisiana, and I'll be sure to share that with you and our folks listening from the Southeast Ohio front as well.
Absolutely.
Well, if you want more Drilling Deeper content, I encourage you to listen to our last episode, that being episode 51. It was inside the Pacific Northwest, based on some producer site visits I did in Oregon and Washington. We had guests from Knife River on, Allied Rock, and Washington Rock Quarries. We had some sound from each of those stops, and again, I encourage you to check out episode 51 of Drilling Deeper. It's on drillingdeeperpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts. With that, I want to thank our show sponsor one last time. Did you know East Rock Solutions is now part of the Kemper Group? And together, they're raising the bar on parts availability, equipment solutions, and turnkey plant design. From the pit to the stockpile, Kemper Group has got your operation covered. To learn more, visit KemperEquipment.com or call 610-273-2066. Thanks to Kemper. With that, I want to thank Kemper one last time for being our show sponsor. Thanks again to Gavin Cole of Kirby-Smith Machinery. And thanks to Robert Krutsinger of Brandeis Machinery for being our special guest on episode 52. And Jack, with that, I think we'll see you next time.
See ya.